Hello and welcome to the Bulletin with UBS on Monocle Radio. Each week, the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in finance take you beyond the numbers and hype, right to the heart of the big issues of the day. This week on the show, we're taking the chance to reflect on the year that was 2025. We thought it was a timely moment to hear, once again, from one of those stellar Nobel laureates in the economic sciences, whose vast knowledge helps to inform UBS's approach to answering the big questions that shape our world. Now, we've been fortunate to feature contributions from an array of these talents on the programme. Today, we have more insights from one of these laureates, who, amongst other things, will be reflecting on their experiences in crafting economic knowledge for the real world. Today, we're hearing from the fantastic Daron Acemoglu, who joined us to discuss the current volatile times we live in and how best to navigate such turbulence. It's a great pleasure to bring you those brilliant insights from Daron Acemoglu on this special edition of the programme. Daron Acemoglu, how do you view today's economic and societal uncertainty, and what broader forces, be they technological, demographic or structural, do you think are contributing most to the current sense of volatility?
My assessment is that if we were to choose one word to describe our current situation, it would be turbulence. This is an unprecedented period of turbulence, in my opinion, because not just one, but 5 fundamental shifts are taking place, and each one, I think, is fairly unique in the context of at least the last 100 years or so. We have AI, which promises to affect everything, everywhere, all at once. We have demographic change that's leading to very rapid aging of populations around the world, especially in a few places. The US is not one of the most rapidly aging one, but US demographics will look very different in 15, 20 years' time. We have climate change, which will require deep adaptations, either in our energy system or in the way that we organize our lives in our cities, probably both. We have globalization and the global world order being remade with potentially far-reaching consequences, and democracy, which was the only game in town in terms of the aspirations of the people in much of the world, has gone into a period of retreat, and many anti-democratic movements are gaining strength and are also threatening to topple lots of the institutions that we have become accustomed to. So each one of those is major, and each one of them could completely change economic, social, and market volatility. And I think in some sense, I'm finding it surprising that markets are not factoring those things in.
Do you see the role of institutions, businesses and individuals evolving in response to those shifts, particularly with the rise of AI and the unprecedented intergenerational wealth transition?
Absolutely, 100%. All of these problems are at some level institutional, and the market reaction is entirely interwoven with that. Let me make that point first in the context of the changing global order and changing institutional balance in the United States. It is quite conceivable that US institutions will be very, very different, irreparably different in a couple of years' time than they were for the entire 20th century. And if that happens, it will have first order financial and macroeconomic consequences. The US has been a huge beneficiary of the world trusting its assets and seeing its assets as safe and reliable. It's no coincidence that the global financial crisis, which originated in the United States, led to a huge inflow of funds into the US assets, treasuries, corporate debt, etc., because that's what people think is safe. Why do they think that? Because they trust US institutions and the US system. They think that debt of corporations will be repaid. The stock market is not up to shenanigans. The government will not default on its debt. And they also bank on US courts functioning if something goes wrong. Most investors would dread having to deal with Chinese courts or Turkish courts, but they're not as afraid of American courts because they think those courts are not going to be bribed. Those courts are not going to side with powerful companies just because of their political connections. Well, all of those could be different. And if it is different, what will investors do? They may not do anything yet, because I think everybody's waiting for somebody else to act, so to speak. But in 5 years' time, we may see many people reduce the weight of US assets in their portfolios, and that shift would have huge market consequences. AI, if indeed it fulfills a quarter of the promises that the industry is making, is going to be completely transformative. What will we get out of that transformation? That's an institutional problem. Institutions are going to determine who benefits, who loses, how unconstrained the more powerful companies and technologies would be. All of that is going to have fundamental consequences.
Daron, what lessons can we draw from past periods of transformation to help navigate the complex changes underway today?
History, even if we are living through a unique period, is our best guide, because we only can learn from these types of turbulent events from what has happened in the past. We have witnessed a lot of countries fail during such periods, which sometimes James Robinson and I refer to them as critical junctures, and we have seen many countries, including the United States, rise up to the occasion. For example, during the aftermath of the Gilded Age, when inequality had reached record high levels, political power had become concentrated in the hands of a few companies, and the industrial structure of the country was completely different. A reform movement that very radically changed the country and its future institutions took place, and it actually showed a lot of adaptability. So the hope is that we will have many countries show the same type of flexibility in changing their institutions for the age of AI, for the age of aging, for the age of climate change. But there is no guarantee. We live in a very polarized world. Social media has made everything more complicated, and AI is making everything more complicated.
And how can individuals and organizations best position themselves to remain resilient and adaptable in the face of such rapid change?
I think you have to start with a vision. You cannot say, oh, I'm just going to be adaptable and I'll bend with the flow. That's not going to work. It's not a recipe for success. So every organization has to ask itself several questions. What is our unique position, edge, commitment? How can we achieve that? How have we achieved that in the past? And what do we want to be in the future? My take on all of these situations is that companies that succeed are those that have a commitment to creating new goods and products and reorganizations that are different, that are revolutionary in some sense. And they have a commitment to their clients, present and future. And they understand, in my opinion, that they can achieve those by having talented people and furthering the capabilities, the expertise of their talented employees. So it's a human-centered approach. I believe the AI age doesn't change that. In fact, AI will be most useful for companies who are committed to creating new goods and services and who will try to do that by leveraging their talent. So if you are in that boat, I think you have to ask these questions and you have to start thinking about how you can retrain your workers or recruit new workers or motivate your workers to do that, and also have the management focus on these new things that you can do. Of course, there will be other companies that will use AI just for cost cutting, for other things. Some of them may make a little bit more profits, but they're not going to be revolutionary. So I think for the revolutionary companies, it's really this vision that matters.
And in the long run, Daron, do you see artificial intelligence as something that will be a net positive?
I believe that AI has the potential to be something positive in the long run, but I am not sure that we'll get there. AI, like many other things, is a tool. Many tools, you can use them very differently. Hammers are extremely useful for repairs and construction, but you can also use them to bludgeon people to death. So which one will it be?
Still to come, Daron Acemoglu tells us more about the start of his journey in economics. Daron, let's go back to the beginning, if we may. Tell us about the spark that led to your interest in the field.
I became interested in social science as a teenager precisely because I was fascinated by the interplay of economics and politics. I was coming of age in Turkey, which had recently suffered a military coup and was in the midst of economic turmoil. There was repression, there were soldiers in our school, and I was wondering whether these things were related. And I thought economics would have the answers. That's why I decided to study economics. And little did I know that those weren't questions that people in economics routinely engaged with. That did not dent my interest in the field once I started knowing it, but that remained as a background interest. And then during my PhD, I had the opportunity to start trying to integrate that into economics.
Now, rising to the top of any field requires determination, talent, and no little hard work, of course. What have been the most important ingredients in your quest to master your craft?
Well, you neglected, I think, the most important ingredient, luck. I think success in many fields requires luck. You need to be at the right place at the right time. You need to have the right interests and skills for the questions that are feasible, interesting, and in vogue at the time. So I've been lucky. My interests and my approach could have led to a complete failure, but things have worked out. But I think one thing that helped me was I was genuinely interested in these questions. I was enthusiastic about them. I was passionate about them. And I think that's a very important ingredient as well. You can be cynical. You can say, this is not what I want. I had this organization, I had this topic, I had this focus, but I'll do it just to earn money or to be successful. Yeah, sometimes people can pull that off, but it's not that easy. It's much better and much more satisfying to work on something you're passionate about.
Let's talk about curiosity. What drives you to keep seeking out new areas, new expertise? And I wonder, has it changed over time?
I think every interesting topic, pretty much everything we can get passionate about, has many layers of depth. And curiosity, passion, a real commitment to those topics would propel you to look deeper and deeper. And at different layers, you will encounter surprises and you will need new skills and new expertise. That's another thing that I think distinguishes people who are really committed. You don't stop. Just because you come to a layer that's difficult, that's not one for which the tools you have until now relied upon are sufficient. You may say, okay, let me skirt that. Let me go somewhere else, or let me stop there. Let me repeat what I've done. I think many people in academia are committed enough not to do that. And at that point, you may require new skills and new ways of thinking. You may need to step back several steps and take a different line of attack.
What are some of the biggest challenges in your daily work, and how do you go about overcoming them?
Shortage of time, scarcity of time. If we had more time, because there's so much to learn, so much to do, so much to interact with people, cloning would be great.
Now, your research relates to the need to centre humans and policy decisions. Do you have a view on why the human touch, quote unquote, remains essential to drive innovation?
Yeah, I have a very human-centric approach. I see a lot of the shortcomings and the potential cruelty and callousness of humans from time to time. But humans are also amazing, and I think their creativity is just inspiring. Their commitment to doing new things is really mind-boggling. And if you look at the things that humans have created a little bit more broadly, it's not just science, which is just absolutely awe-inspiring, but also the way that human communities have changed over the last tens of thousands of years, new institutions, new norms, new ways of organizing society. I don't think it's going to be easy for machines, AI, artificial general intelligence, whatever it is, to replicate that. And if that's the case, it provides a very different perspective. We should seek the endless quest to replicate the human mind. Instead, we should seek to understand how it is that machines can complement humans. And then if that's the case, and if those kinds of machines can be produced and deployed effectively, then humans are still going to be a very important ingredient into creativity, into doing complex tasks, into setting goals and setting aspirations.
So you don't see a point where we'll be able to replicate the human mind, if you like?
Never say never, but I don't think it's near. I think the news of the demise of the human mind are much exaggerated, and they're not going to become a reality anytime soon. So we better get used to lots of attempts by AI to replace human that backfire, and we should also be ready for those inspiring scientists, entrepreneurs, companies that find a different path to complement humans.
To what extent can people pursue education or training or retrain to ensure they're best placed to react to the shifts you're talking about?
At the end of the day, every major change will require us to make some adjustments. Humans are incredibly adaptable, but that adaptation sometimes takes time and sometimes takes effort. Living in small bands of 100 people roaming the jungle is very different than living in a society of 100 million people with centralized institutions. We make those adaptations. Living with industrial technology is going to be very different than living with agricultural technology, and adapting to AI is going to be different as well. But here, vision matters greatly again. If your vision is one in which AI will take over everything, our adaptation is how can we enjoy video games more? But if your vision is one in which AI can complement humans, then A, how do we get to that future? What is our contribution to get to that future? And B, what are the things that humans can do with the help of AI, with machines in the service of humans, that will really elevate humanity's great strengths? That's what I think we have to think about. And education is a very important role. But it's not just more college, postgraduate, let's send everybody to do an MBA or master's in communication or computing. People have different skills, different interests. How can we get people to become better electricians, plumbers, nurses, gardeners, depending on your skills, depending on your interests? And AI can help with many of these things, provided that we create the right AI tool.
Daron Acemoglu, bringing us to the end of this special edition of the show here on Monocle Radio. You can listen again and explore more at monocle.com. While you're there, why not join the club and subscribe to Monocle magazine? Of course, you can always follow this programme wherever you get your podcasts. And as ever, you can find out how UBS can help you at ubs.com. Whilst you're there, you can hear more from and find out more about the Nobel laureates that UBS seeks inspiration from. Just head over to ubs.com/Nobel. This is The Bulletin with UBS on Monocle Radio. I'm Tom Edwards. Thanks for listening.